its prominence or its profile was raised when we had that fire down in the Lacrosse building in Melbourne back in June 2014. Obviously, that was the first of the cladding fires here and the only one to date in Australia, where some 500 odd people had to be evacuated on the early hours of that morning as a result of a fire that was started by a French tourist having a late night cigarette on the balcony. And as we understand it, the cigarette wasn't extinguished, and it sort of fell off the table and got in behind the air conditioning and got through some of the joints in the aluminium cladding, and that fire went up. Then, of course, we had that unfortunate incident over in the UK with the Grenfell towers back in June 2017, which had the unfortunate consequence of some 71 people losing their lives. So I think that's what's raised it and brought it to its profile. It's certainly been a subject of discussion under the construction codes over the last couple of years, but I think it's those fires that have initially brought given it that high profile. And then obviously we've seen a response both from government, in terms of setting up task forces, and the legislature in terms of bringing in new laws to deal with combustible cladding. It's difficult to say across Australia. What I can say is, because each of the states are dealing with this individually, it's a state-based problem. So certainly in New South Wales, the government has set up a cladding task force, and as at September this year, they'd inspected some 2,300 buildings. I should say they'd issued some 33,000 letters to building owners in respect of potential or possible cladding on their building. The New South Wales Fire Brigades inspected some 2,300 buildings, of which 455, as at September 2017, had been identified as high priority. Of that 455, about 230 are residential buildings. So that'll give you some idea of the scope, certainly just here in New South Wales alone. It's a complex question because ultimately responsibility for the panels that are on the buildings lies with the owners. So in terms of identifying it as an issue and attending to rectification, responsibility lies with the owners. Then of course you've got that complex web underneath that of owners looking to pass those rectification costs onto others who may be liable. That may include builders who attach the product there. It may extend to consultants who specified the product, or architects or certifiers who are responsible for approving the use of a product, or in fact of preparing the design drawings that were reflect the buildings that was to be built. Additionally, you've got the suppliers who might be liable. So there are a number of parties who may attract some liability, and of course as the owners who have the ultimate responsibility of rectification look to pass those costs through to other parties, that's where we start to see a number of parties being joined to these proceedings. One of the main players in this area is obviously going to be the insurers, and so it'll be interesting to see what approach they take. Certainly the Insurance Council has identified and developed protocols for checking and identifying and reviewing buildings for the application of combustible cladding. And of course what we're seeing with the insurers as they re-rate the risks, they're seeing significant increases in premiums which they're starting to charge on to the owners of these buildings. The obvious complexity or the obvious issue that needs to be addressed is cost. But also whenever you retrofit something, you've got access issues to building. It's a lot easier and a lot more effective to build a facade as the construction process has been undertaken, whereas to come in retrospectively and dismantle and remove the existing cladding and then replace that creates some significant difficulties. For example, if we use the Lacrosse building as an example down there, you've got access issues in terms of the actual geographic environment. There's a bit of a wind tunnel there, so getting access to remove the cladding creates some issues. You've also got access issues where you've got the units that are occupied by people and the disturbance and getting access to these units to actually undertake the repairs. And then you've got access in terms of the method of repair. Do you repair it and replace the facade from the inside of the unit, or you do it from the outside? And then if you're going to replace it from the outside, do you abseil down the building, or do you use it by way of a swing stage scaffolding? So there are a number of access issues. That's one of the real challenges in and around replacing the combustible cladding.